eWIC is almost here, and there are some exciting benefits to eWIC. Once eWIC is implemented, there'll be no checking the WIC ID at the store, no more orange cards to verify, there's no checking of valid dates of food instruments, no entering the pay exactly amount, no signatures required, no vendor stamp required, and all this results in less cashier errors. And there are no more rejected check fees, which saves the stores money. The beauty of eWIC is if the WIC customer has the card and the PIN, then they can purchase the WIC items available in their benefit balance. So join me in eventually saying goodbye to food instruments and hello to eWIC, because it is going to be such a great thing for our vendor community. I'm going to review the schedule. We've looked at it during other webinars, but I think it's important to just review it again. In order to know when clinics will be issuing eWIC cards and when you can anticipate WIC customers beginning to shop using their eWIC card, we're going to review the rollout schedule. The Alabama Department of Public Health is divided into districts. We will have a 3-month pilot and then begin statewide rollout. Phase 1 of the pilot includes 3 counties, Autauga, Elmore, and Montgomery, in the East Central District. Phase 2 will include the rest of the East Central District and the Northeastern District. After pilot, there will be 3 rollout periods. All authorized WIC vendors will be required to continue accepting paper food instruments from WIC customers as long as they are within valid dates. The schedule and the ADPH district map were mailed out in August to all our authorized WIC vendors. You can also view a copy of the district map on our website, which is alabamapublichealth.gov. There are 2 ways to process eWIC. The point-of-sale system, or POS, is the place where retail transactions occur. There are 2 types of point-of-sale systems that process eWIC transactions, which we will review: an integrated system and a stand-beside system. In Alabama, over 95% of our authorized WIC vendors utilize an integrated POS system. An integrated system means the WIC software is part of the store's cash register system. Integrating WIC into the POS system and normal business processes is the preferred solution because it allows you to manage all aspects of eWIC in one system. These registers are programmed to accept all forms of payment, including eWIC, SNAP, debit, credit, and cash. It also allows for what is known as a mixed basket transaction, where a WIC customer would not have to separate their WIC foods from other items. In a stand-beside point-of-sale system, the eWIC software is on a WIC-only device that is only capable of supporting WIC payments. WIC customers will be required to separate their WIC items from other items. Cashiers will be required to double scan the WIC items. There will only be a few authorized vendors in Alabama that utilize a stand-beside system, and these devices are provided and serviced by Conduent, Alabama's eWIC service provider. So again, over 95% of our authorized WIC vendors will utilize an integrated POS system and be allowed to conduct mixed basket transactions where the WIC customer won't have to separate their non-WIC items from their WIC items. There are 3 levels of eWIC certification. Level 1 and Level 2 certifications are for new systems that have not previously been certified. Most systems have already been Level 1 and Level 2 certified, as there are over 45 states that have implemented eWIC statewide. These types of certifications are handled by the cash register companies along with the state service provider and sometimes state WIC staff. As an authorized WIC vendor, you will be involved in the Level 3 certification process. Level 3 certifications are performed in the store and include a WIC representative completing a balance inquiry, purchasing multiple items, voiding the multiple item purchase, and then purchasing a single WIC item and confirming the transaction. The WIC representative also verifies the receipt prints as required by federal regulations. Level 3 certifications allow the opportunity for WIC staff to assess readiness while also educating store personnel about eWIC. This chart shows the dates of when the state WIC office will be conducting Level 3 certs at the stores. The dates shown reflect the time frame of when we will be conducting the visits. We do not call and schedule these visits, meaning you will not have an exact time of when we will be coming to your store, but it will be within the time frame indicated on the slide. It is expected that the store's cash register systems will be ready by the date shown. Being ready for Level 3 certification entails being able to process an eWIC transaction and having store personnel available to conduct the eWIC transaction. If you are questioning whether or not you are ready, contact your third-party processor or value-added reseller. If you are part of a major or regional corporation, they are probably already working to ensure you are ready. But if you have any questions about your readiness for the Level 3 certs, again, you'd contact your third-party processor or your value-added reseller. WIC representatives conducting the certifications will identify themselves to management and explain the nature of the visit. WIC representatives conducting these visits, when they test the system, they're testing the system to ensure that it passes, meaning that it will conduct an eWIC transaction from start to finish. If you fail by chance this Level 3 visit, you will be given the opportunity to address the issue, and the WIC representative will return to conduct another Level 3 certification. And as I mentioned, these are live in-store tests conducted by the WIC representatives. We are there simply to ensure that the cash register system is ready to accept eWIC transactions. Now I want to go over a few important concepts to understand regarding eWIC. You must understand the approved product list and the WIC customer's benefit balance. To ensure that the WIC customer purchases only healthy, WIC-approved foods, Alabama WIC maintains a database of universal product codes. This is called the APL file. WIC benefits are issued to an electronic benefit account at the local WIC clinic, and the WIC customer's benefit balance includes all benefits that are available for purchase on their eWIC card. The eWIC transaction is driven by the APL and the corresponding benefits on the WIC customer's card. And that means that the cashier will no longer have to serve as the WIC police, because that approved product list is what's driving the transaction of what is and is not WIC approved. The APL file is a database of categorized universal product codes referred to as UPCs. It ensures WIC customers only purchase Alabama WIC approved foods. The APL is maintained by the Alabama WIC program. The APL file restricts cashiers from overriding items. That means if an item doesn't scan, there is no way for the cashier to override that item like they've previously been doing with paper food instruments. During the eWIC training that's provided by the State WIC office, you'll learn different ways to address what to do when an item does not scan. The price lookup codes is a very important topic for the vendors to understand. The Alabama APL file will include the International Federation for Produce Standards price lookup codes. For example, on the screen there's a large Fuji apple, and the PLU code for that apple is 4131. Now, what do you do if you have a fresh fruit or vegetable that has a store-generated UPC? Those store-generated UPCs must be mapped or linked back to a PLU code. The Alabama APL file will not contain UPCs for fresh fruits and vegetables. Store-generated fresh fruits and vegetables UPCs must be mapped or linked back to an International Federation of Produce Standards PLU code for the same produce item in Alabama's APL. I've shown two examples on the screen. The organic sweet corn UPC would be mapped to PLU 94078 for organic sweet corn yellow. And the bag of oranges with a UPC code would be mapped to PLU 3107 for navel medium oranges. Mapping is required because fresh fruits and vegetables are seasonal items, and there could be 40 different UPCs for one seasonal item that sells out faster than the Alabama WIC program can add the item to the APL file. Typically, corporate offices will handle mapping for the stores they support. Independent stores will likely complete the mapping process at the store level. No UPCs other than those for fresh fruits and vegetables can be mapped. So all store-generated fresh fruit and vegetable UPCs must be mapped back to an International Federation of Produce Standards PLU. Vendors must connect their POS system for each outlet to the state's eWIC processor system at least once each 24-hour period to transfer reconciliation files and the WIC APL file. Adhering to this federal requirement will ensure that stores have the most up-to-date version of the APL file available in their register systems. Conduent has a pre-pilot APL file that they are utilizing to test transactions prior to pilot. If you have a copy of the file, please note that we are adding products on a regular basis. So the file that you use before you go to pilot or your rollout will contain more UPC codes than are in there now. In Alabama, Alabama WIC staff have been diligently working for years to build the initial APL file. It's important to remember that even after eWIC rollout, the APL will always be a work in progress. New products come onto the market and package sizes change, which often means new UPCs. We will need your help to make sure the APL is as up to date as possible. You will have the ability to submit UPCs to the state WIC office when a suspected item is not in the WIC APL. Please follow your store's guidelines for submitting items to the state WIC office. If you are part of a large corporation, they may prefer that the submission comes through their corporate office because they handle all the UPCs at the corporate level. Items submitted to the state WIC office must be thoroughly reviewed to ensure they meet all federal requirements. If after review the product is approved, you will see it in a future APL download. A new UPC will take up to 72 hours to be downloaded into the APL file and available for purchase at the store. This is why it's so important that the stores download the APL file every 24 hours, because new products are continually being added. And the guidelines for submissions can be found at our website, alabamapublichealth.gov/WIC/eWIC. And this information, again, will continue to be on our website. And also we're working to update our Alabama WIC app to where vendors would have the ability to submit UPCs through our app, which will make it a much easier and streamlined process for the vendors. So that is coming soon, and we will notify vendors when that is available on our free Alabama WIC app. It is a major endeavor to implement eWIC. State WIC office staff are extremely busy ensuring that we have a successful pilot and rollout. I'm going to review several key eWIC implementation activities that impact our authorized WIC vendors. In order to accept eWIC, authorized WIC vendors will be required to complete a contract amendment. The amendments will be mailed 2 months prior to your rollout. If you roll out in June, then you will receive your amendment in April. When you receive the contract amendment, the cover letter will contain a due date. It is imperative that you return the Alabama WIC vendor contract amendment by the due date. Contracts for both phases of the pilot have already been mailed and were due in our office yesterday. And there are some vendors that have not submitted those contract amendments. Again, it's important to return those because failure to return the amendment can result in contract termination. The contract amendment covers things such as eWIC transaction processing, what store personnel can and can't do during an eWIC transaction. Vendors are required to conduct a balance inquiry upon request of the WIC customer. Vendors are required to scan or manually enter the UPCs directly from the WIC food item being purchased. Vendors are prohibited from scanning UPCs from a scan book. And vendors must adhere to the current USDA eWIC operating rules, the technical implementation guide, and the industry standards. So those are just a few things that the amendment covers. But again, please watch for those in the mail. So follow that rollout schedule that we showed earlier, and be aware that your contracts will come 2 months prior to your rollout date. If you are one of those vendors that will receive a stand-beside, and like we mentioned, there's very few vendors in Alabama that will receive the stand-beside systems, but if you are one of them, you will get a separate contract that you have to enter into with Conduent. Conduent vendor agreements must be returned as soon as possible so the equipment can be shipped. Conduent will provide training on the stand-beside devices, but it will not occur until they've received a completed agreement with the vendor. Failure to return the Conduent vendor agreement can result in your Alabama WIC vendor contract being terminated. Therefore, if you are one of the few vendors receiving a stand-beside device, you must adhere to the above information to ensure you can continue to accept WIC. Training is critical for a successful eWIC implementation. In eWIC, for training, there's two components. There's store training on the system itself, and there's state WIC office training requirements that cover eWIC policy and do's and don'ts of an eWIC transaction. Because all POS systems operate differently, Alabama WIC does not train store personnel how to conduct an eWIC transaction at the register. Store employees should receive training on how to use their specific point-of-sale system from the corporate office, or for independent stores, the company that provides the POS system. How training is conducted on your cash register system depends on the type of system. Integrated vendors receive training from the corporation or the corporation's ECR provider. Vendors utilizing the stand-beside provided devices will be trained by Conduent using a ship and train model. The trainings are coordinated by the vendor and Conduent. So again, over 95% of our vendors are integrated, so they're either going to receive training from the corporate office or from their ECR provider on how to conduct the eWIC transaction in their register system. If we receive calls from store personnel regarding how to use a POS system to conduct an eWIC transaction, we will instruct them to contact their store management or Conduent depending on the type of POS system they use. State WIC office training. The state WIC office is utilizing the department's Learning Content Management System, known as LCMS, to conduct the eWIC vendor training. Each individual store must complete the training acknowledgement form in LCMS to meet their training requirement. Pilot Phase 1 and Phase 2 stores have already received the information regarding accessing the State WIC Office eWIC training. Our apologies if you are one of these stores, as the letter indicated it would be available on Tuesday, and due to technical difficulties, it will not be live in LCMS until close of business today. We appreciate your patience and understand it was a little difficult if you went to look for it on the 22nd and it wasn't there. Again, we apologize. All other stores will receive the training information 2 months prior to your rollout date. It will come in conjunction with the eWIC contract amendment that I referenced earlier. All authorized WIC vendors must acknowledge completion of this training prior to accepting eWIC. The written communication you receive will outline the training requirements. Vendors will also receive an addendum to the Alabama WIC Vendor Procedure Handbook regarding eWIC policy. This is a helpful tool to use when conducting store trainings. Again, we do not program registers. It is imperative that you train your store personnel how to use the register to conduct an eWIC transaction. I've heard numerous stories from other state WIC agencies that have implemented eWIC that store personnel were not trained. I understand there is a great deal of turnover in the grocery industry, and training can be challenging. eWIC streamlines the transaction, but there is still important information that the cashier needs to conduct the eWIC transaction. The eWIC training provided by the State WIC Office outlines important information regarding eWIC, and it is critical that the information is shared with all store employees. As I mentioned earlier, this training will cover what to do when an item doesn't scan, which is a big part of ensuring a successful eWIC transaction. We are asking for your help to ensure a successful eWIC implementation. It is so important that you respond to eWIC vendor communication. As you have heard, there will be a great deal of information being mailed that requires follow-up on your part. It is my understanding that there are already sales companies contacting independent retailers about eWIC equipment. The only official eWIC communication will come from the State WIC Office or Conduent. Now keep in mind, this is a contract renewal year for our vendors. Normally the renewal applications are sent in the spring, but due to the demands of eWIC implementation, we will be mailing the contract renewal applications in February. Please ensure you complete these and submit them by the deadline indicated in the letter you will receive with the vendor renewal application. The second thing you can do is review the pre-pilot food list on our website. We are asking for your help in reviewing this list to identify WIC-approved items in your store that are not on the list. Instructions for reporting items not on the list is available on our website. The pre-pilot food list does not include the PLU codes that I mentioned earlier, but they will be part of the Alabama WIC's official APL file. To date, we have had minimal UPCs submitted to the State WIC Office. As I mentioned earlier, it's imperative that you as vendors assist us by submitting UPCs, reviewing the pre-pilot food list, and submitting any missing UPCs will assist us in ensuring our initial APL file contains all possible Alabama WIC-approved items. This will alleviate problems at the register when we go live. So please, if you're part of a corporation, ensure that somebody in your corporation, in the company, has looked at our pre-pilot food list. It's either we did an exceptional job collecting UPCs initially, or a lot of y'all hadn't looked at it because we don't have that many submissions. Maybe we did a really good job getting all the UPCs, but as I mentioned earlier, that APL file is always a work in progress because new items are going to come on the market, and new items include new UPCs. So please take a moment, access that on our website. I also send it out via email and an Excel spreadsheet to make it easier to search. So if you need that in an Excel spreadsheet, don't hesitate to contact the State WIC Office, and we'll be happy to get that to you. So who do I call for help? If you have an integrated system, you'll call your ECR provider or your third-party processor. And if you have a stand-beside system, you will call Conduent at 1-855-279-0682. As with any new initiative, we anticipate questions leading up to the pilot and rollout. In order to efficiently and effectively respond to these questions, please submit them to the email shown on the screen. And we do have a few questions on the side that I'm going to look at and see if I can cover them for y'all. I have a question. It says, just to confirm, you will not cross over from actual UPC codes on produce items. Well, with with the fresh fruit and the fresh vegetables, you'll need to take those store-generated UPC codes and map them to one of the International Federation Produce Standards PLU codes. But if you scanned, say you had a container of, I don't know, some kind of, like was shown on the screen, if you have some fresh corn that you wrapped and put a store-generated UPC on it, and they scan that store-generated UPC at the register, it wouldn't let them purchase it unless it was mapped back to a PLU code. And then somebody had asked for the International Federation of Produce Standards PLU codes. I can get that out. We do have a list of those, and it will be in our final APL. And then I had another question about PLUs. They were asking, Alabama only allows linking of like items, such as if they have cut pineapple, then it can only be linked to a pineapple PLU code. And that's true. Like, we don't allow the use of the generic 4469. Only if you want to do like items to like items. So like the example given in the question, pineapple will be a UPC for pineapple. If you had a container of cut pineapple that had a UPC store generated, it would go to one of the PLU codes for pineapple. And the same thing for bagged items. So if you had like that was another question we got, do we map all fruits and vegetables that are bagged with UPC codes with a universal code? Yes. So if you had a bag of apples that had a UPC code, that would need to be mapped to a UPC code for apples. And like the example that was on the screen, it was a bag of oranges, and it was mapped to the PLU for oranges. And we had another question about the generic PLU code. We will not allow the use of the generic PLU code. And somebody had asked if they'd be able to print out the slideshow. Yes, when we put the webinars on our website, we do include the slides. So you will be able to print these slides ahead of time. I mean, not ahead of time, but you'll be able to print them to use if you needed to use them for some type of training. So somebody had asked, how do we put cut fruit in for eWIC? So if you had a cup of, say you had cantaloupe, pineapples, and grapes, you'd only code that to one PLU code, and the industry standard is you code it to whatever had the most. So if you look in that jar and you see the most cantaloupe, it has more cantaloupe than anything, then you would code that UPC to the PLU for cantaloupe. And that appears to be all the, well, we have another question. I have a question. When you say link the bag items to PLU numbers, would the cashier have to enter the amount of units that is in the bag? You know, I do not know how to answer that question. I have a co-presenter with our service provider Conduent, and I'm hoping that maybe she can answer that. Valerie, if you know the answer to that, if you could send that to me. And I'm getting a lot. I have another one about how would you link bags of salads and coleslaw. We will actually have the UPCs in there for bagged salad. They will be in our APL file. I have about, do we have PLU numbers for bagged items? do we have PLU numbers for bagged items? The example I gave was with the oranges or apples. They would be linked to that PLU for oranges or linked to that PLU for apples. And Conduent, our service provider, she did help me out on the previous question that asked how you do the units. And it would be one item. So that goes back to the previous question about when you say link bagged items to PLU numbers, would the cashier have to enter the amount of units that is in the bag? It would be one item. I have a good question. Somebody asked, the APL is only used to validate the item is WIC eligible, not to assign or determine a price value. Correct? In our eWIC store training that we do for the state WIC office training that I mentioned, we go through in eWIC. I'm not sure if this is the particular question, but in eWIC, the UPC code actually has a not to exceed price tied to it. So the UPC is going to have a not to exceed price assigned to that UPC. I'm not sure if that's a specific question, but when you see the state WIC office training, when you view that training, it should provide more information on that. I have a question about once the APL is in the store's POS system, do you prefer cashiers to not override if the customer is paying with paper, or should they continue to override paper transactions if the item appears to be WIC eligible? Once you get that APL file in the register, I would go by the APL file, because the APL file is going to contain, you know, all the Alabama WIC approved UPCs. What we believe to happen and what we've seen happen during compliance buys is that there's a lot of items that are being allowed for purchase that aren't Alabama WIC approved. Like, they could be really similar or close, but they're not. They've been overriding a lot of things that aren't Alabama WIC approved. And somebody said, will there be a list of PLU codes for review? It's an International Federation of Produce Standards. It's an international list it's actually available on the internet, and you can search any item to determine its PLU code. It's the International Federation of Produce Standards website. But we can also get the list out to stores, as I mentioned earlier. And again, that training, I just want to mention the state WIC office training for eWIC is done via our LCMS system, and it is a video that you watch. It's about 35 minutes, and it goes over some key concepts of eWIC to help the cashier understand benefit issuance, APL, and some do's and don'ts for the eWIC transaction. As I mentioned, it'll be accessible through our LCMS system. Those aren't live trainings. It's done by video. But as I've referenced earlier, this will be it is a contract renewal year. So in September, we will have face-to-face eWIC. We'll have face-to-face vendor training, which will include eWIC. And you have to remember that during this transition, you're going to have WIC participants coming into your store with paper food instruments, because we're going to be issuing paper until that last rollout, and we have a 3-month issuance cycle. So there's going to be paper out there for a while. We did have one vendor that actually threw away their vendor stamp because they heard they wouldn't need it in eWIC. Please hear me when I say, do not throw away your vendor stamp. Even when you go eWIC, you're still going to be processing paper food instruments, and you will need that vendor stamp. Somebody had asked where they can find the LCMS system for the training video. If you have not received information on that, it hasn't been sent to you, because we're only doing it 2 months out of each rollout, because we don't want to do it too early, because we don't want you to view it and then forget it. So if you haven't received notification of that training in the mail, you will get it in the next couple months. I had somebody ask, will the state allow us to turn on eWIC for stores in surrounding counties after pilot? That is only going to be an option for stores that are statewide, and those stores have been notified. So they call it flipping the switch, which means they can accept eWIC under certain circumstances statewide, and those stores have been notified, because there's very stringent requirements around that, and it's only for stores that are truly statewide all across the state in Alabama. And I think that was the last question. There were a couple questions that came in about PLU codes that, to be honest, I'm going to have to research and get back to you, but I've got them recorded, and we'll definitely get all those PLU questions answered and get that information out. Hopefully I'll do like a PLU Q&A document and can get that out to our authorized WIC vendors to alleviate some of the concerns with the mapping and the PLU process. But I don't want to give out misinformation, so as I said, I've got them recorded. We'll get you some answers and get that information out to you. I truly appreciate all of you and all that you do for our WIC participants, and I understand the challenges in the grocery industry and the turnover with cashiers, and that training is quite challenging. And please just know that eWIC does make things simpler, and it's just such a great thing to look forward to. And I appreciate all that you do. And if you have any additional questions, don't hesitate to email them to our email address shown there on the screen, and we will definitely get them answered. Thanks, y'all, and have a great day.